Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to the TIP Technology Innovation Pioneers panel on emerging technologies on the future of manufacturing. My name is Matthew COCHRAN with DSMC, and we have a model that we've used over the years at DSMC for monthly working groups that we'd like to replicate today. And so we'll run you through our format, and we're very pleased to be joined by experts in this field for emerging technologies on the future of manufacturing. So much so that the last panel was so closely related to what we want to talk about today that Mohammed has graciously joined us as an additional panelist. The first thing I'd like to do, as we do with all of our monthly working groups, is can we go around and discuss a little bit about who you are, who you represent, but first and most importantly, spend a minute talking about your view on the emerging technologies on the future of manufacturing. FAHMI, can we start with you, please?
Hi, thanks. My name is Pharma Shetty. I'm part of Immensa Technology Labs. We're the largest additive manufacturing service bureau in the region. What we focus on is utilizing 3D printing into development and manufacturing of products for end use. In terms of our expertise in additive manufacturing, 3D printing, our views is that this technology is becoming quite mainstream. Over the last couple of years, we've seen more manufacturers across the world use it and integrate it into mainstream manufacturing, whether it's contract manufacturing or OEMs. And we see that, and this is a technology that we think adds a lot of value to this part of the world because of the size that we have in this region. I guess that's
we're going to get more into that detail about how you're doing that.
Exactly.
Jerry, if we can come to you.
Thank you, Matthew. Well, I'm representing a Swedish company called Saab, and we are in the security and defense business. And we're going to establish ourselves in the UAE, in Savasson Industrial Park, with a development and production company here. And myself, I've been working with offsets for the last 20 years for Saab.
Thank you. Tim?
Good afternoon. I'm Tim Allen from QinetiQ. QinetiQ is a UK originated company that actually came out of defense research and experimentation, initially as part of government, but now very firmly in the private sector. We're spread around the world, US, Australia, and here in Abu Dhabi. I'm pleased to say we've quite recently announced a joint venture here to set up one of our capabilities in Twelson Industrial Park. We have a very keen interest in the whole gamut, really, of fourth industrial revolution technologies that have been touched on today, both from a research perspective and also into experimentation and test and evaluation. But also, as one of our key roles is providing advice and support to government, and not purely defence, around the impact of some of these technologies and what they mean for the future. And more specifically in manufacturing, we're not a high-volume manufacturer, but what we do manufacture tends to be coming out as spin-outs from research and development work that we're doing, which again is looking to leverage a number of technologies that we've been touching on today.
Thank you. Helmut?
My name is HELMUT REICHELT. I'm German. I'm working for the German company Diehl. Diehl is a family-owned company. We are in the technology, in aviation, in defense, in metering, in metal, and in controls. What does it mean? You don't see our products, but we are in your life because you use our control mechanisms in the refrigerator, you drive with our synchronized rings in your car, and you fly with Airbus with our mood lighting system. What does it mean? I'm engineer. What does it mean emerging technologies and in the future for manufacturing? What is emerging technologies? I have put something together like digital design, 3D printing, advanced robotics, advanced analytics, advanced materials, artificial intelligence, blockchain, Internet of Things, all together under Industry 4.0. Of course, everybody knows these subjects, deeper or less deeper. And of course, in the industry and in the production especially, we have to handle with these things. Coming from the Y generation, the young boys, they are growing up, and girls with their or thumb, they can teach the parents how to do the new things. But on the other side, they have to learn also how the business is going from the older generation. And this is our subject. For all new technologies, you need the right people. We heard this already this morning in the healthcare. Human resources. We are concentrating to bridge the gap between the young and the older generations, the academics and the industrial need, especially here in the UAE, working in the similar fields, working in TIP, Tawazun programs. We have to produce in the future here, and we need the right people. And this is where we need also to focus on trainings, and maybe when I have another chance, I give you a little bit more insight about these things.
Thank you very much. We do want to come back to that and learn more about the STEM programs that you're supporting here. Simon?
Good afternoon. My name's Simon Deakin. I work for Kearney. We're a global management consultancy company. In particular, at the moment, we work with the Ministry of Defence, concentrating, in my case, on defence industry and research and development. So the growth of the research and development base and the personnel and the skills that go with that are of particular interest. With that, the advances into fourth industrial revolution technologies and industry, because they will be essential to growing the industrial base of the country and the research base of the country, and therefore of particular interest.
Thank you. Mohammed?
Hi, my name is Mohammed Al Kurdi. I represent two entities here today. One is Sanduq Al Watan, which is a national initiative to promote innovation here in the UAE and develop human capital. The other is the Khalifa Innovation Center, which is a new high-tech incubator that is positioned in Khalifa University that thinks about bringing in the best technologies that are being produced here in the UAE and turning it into real-life businesses and growing that. My future view on emerging technologies is that I believe the most important element is not each technology on its own, whether it's artificial intelligence or blockchain, but how you bring these technologies together to have maximum value. And it's really the case of the sum is bigger than the parts that compose it.
The 1 and 1 doesn't equal 2, but 11.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we have a number of questions that have come from our hosts, and we very much like to thank the Ministry of Economy and Department of Economic Development for hosting TIP today, and importantly, picking up on what some of the other speakers and panelists said. If I can go back to Her Excellency Minister of State Minister of State for Advanced Sciences, and I'm paraphrasing here. The UAE is an incubator, but it's not only an incubator, but it's an incubator all the way through to implementer. That we're facing challenges, but we can use what's the best use of technology to meet those challenges. And an important point that was brought up was, how do we motivate R&D? How do we look at where the requirements are? And how do we link those real requirements then to an incubator, to a patent, and then hashtag made in the UAE? That's really what it's about. How do we create those future technologies for manufacturing here so that they are a made in the UAE development that we see around the world as a stamp, a hallmark of manufactured innovation. And then also some comments from His Excellency Saif Al-Hajri that really UAE is using best practices, focusing on bringing experts from around the world to share with the UAE. Not only do we have our citizens, but the residents. I've been here 15 years, and I've learned a lot. But I also know that it's between the residents and the citizens sharing those best practices from everywhere we go to be able to develop together. And again, getting back to advancing the UAE in the world of innovation. So looking at some mega trends in emerging technologies on the future of manufacturing. We did some research and we looked at where does the United Nations look at investing and promoting growth? Where are international bodies helping emerging technologies in evolving marketplaces? And what's fascinating to see there are a top 5 that have percolated to the top in 2018 and have been discussed at the Global Manufacturing Industrial Summit that was put on by Strada and His Excellency Badr Al-Olma and others. number one was e-commerce, but this isn't the way we may think about e-commerce. This is where IT is meeting operational technology. How are those two things linking up? The second one was smart manufacturing. I think you've mentioned this couple, and there's some correlation. Blockchain, AI, data. We've talked about that, but what does it really mean to the manufacturing? How are those emerging technologies going to help manufacturing? Number three was robotics. Now, robotics from many of the large companies represented here were always at the top. There wasn't competition, and now what we're seeing are smaller robotics companies being able to compete against larger robotics companies and also making it more affordable that more industries can use robotics. Number four is networks and cybersecurity. We heard a lot about it because of the focus on healthcare. Really, what's the most secure thing that you want? Your personal data. But what are the emerging technologies that are represented? And then additive manufacturing, 3D printing. You know, where are those top 5 mega trends in emerging technologies? But those aren't all of them. And so one of the things that we'd like to talk about is, can you bring out, and I'd like to offer this to the group, whoever would like to talk about this, is there has been a discussion about the role of government in innovation and development. But Mohammed, I think you said it. One of the barriers to that is really getting the requirements, or I interpret it as that. Specifically, and let's talk about defense and aerospace. A number of our panelists are representing defense and aerospace companies. To be able to bring requirements, real requirements out at a government level that not only serve the government, but also have a dual with technology. You know, what are some of the barriers to that, and what are some of the solutions?
If you'd allow me to begin with the answer. We did a big study on this dual technology kind of based concept. And we all know that it's extremely important. I mean, the iPhone that's in my pocket right now, most of the technologies that make up this iPhone have been developed by DARPA-funded research or DARPA-funded companies, right? And I think the US has done such a great job that I think we need to emulate it in that regard. So one is getting the needs out, absolutely. And I think one of the biggest barriers there is that there's always fear, or there's a risk factor of disclosing particular information that have to do with the defense sector, right? And I think we need to be able to create an environment that would meet the needs of any Ministry of Defense, whether it's in the UAE or anywhere else, so that they feel comfortable sharing some of those needs. And there's different ways to do it. You don't have to tell people what you want out of a capability. You can, there's different ways of cutting up the different capabilities and requirements that you require, and communicating that to the market. So I think that's a big element. But I think a bigger element for me is not just about funding the research or giving you the needs, but it's about consuming the products, as I mentioned before. It's about giving startups a stable source of revenue so that they're able to take that technology and implement it in a civilian kind of market. Because usually, I mean, these companies, most of these companies use these technologies in the defense sector first, and then they migrate towards civilian purposes. And if you don't have that revenue set, it'll be very difficult for you to do that jump.
Tim, I see you shaking your head in agreement. Maybe you can help us use a UK has Defense Science Technology Labs. QinetiQ has worked very closely to help commercialize that into exactly what Mohammed is talking about, dual-use technology. You were shaking your head. Why?
Well, I think the reason I was shaking my head a little bit is because it suggests that this is going to be requirements-led. I think it's going to be technology-driven. I personally think that what we're seeing here is technology way out in front, and then people then looking at how it can be used and how it can be exploited. But I take your fundamental point that someone's got to be looking at those technologies and thinking about them. So, you know, if you take blockchain, well, blockchain immediately, most people just associated that with cryptocurrencies. But now the breadth of the applications for blockchain are absolutely huge. You know, it can basically provide information assurance across virtually every domain you can think of that has ever appeared during the current industrial revolution, you know, the digital era. The role of government's a really interesting thing to try and define. And again, I think one has to think very broadly about it. And I think we also have to think quite broadly about the bigger picture as to what this fourth industrial revolution can mean. Because if you define an industrial revolution as being something that's going to affect profound social and economic change, then you've also got to be thinking about the consequences of that as well. And I personally think the UAE is very well set up to handle it. You don't, in some ways, you're unencumbered by some of the legacy of the first and second industrial revolutions. You don't have all that baggage. to carry with you, and you have a very forward-thinking and visionary leadership, very strong leadership that's able to set the conditions for these things to happen and to happen successfully. And you're also a society that is living and has lived with enormous change in recent years and is therefore very comfortable with the idea of change and managing it but preserving the things that matter. If you look back, and I don't want to give anyone a history lesson about Victorian England and what the first Industrial Revolution did, but it was absolutely monumental. It turned everybody's lives upside down. The Fourth Industrial Revolution, I don't see it, perhaps I'm being naive and I'm underestimating it, necessarily being in quite the same way. But the effects of the information age put on steroids, which is sort of what we're looking at here, is going to affect society, it's going to affect culture, it's going to affect ethics, it's going to affect the way that financial institutions operate. It is going to reach into so many different places. And this is where the breadth of the role of government is so enormous, because it goes beyond just, here's a research project, here's some money, go and do it. Well, actually, without the regulation and the thinking through of the ethical issues and everything else that goes with it, you could be on a road for disaster. UAE, I don't think, is, because it recognizes these things and is addressing those in tandem.
Well, and maybe if I can turn this over, Jerry and FAHMI, you're manufacturing here. You're setting up to manufacture, and there's a reason for that. Can you talk a little bit, I guess, about what were some of the barriers that you found in setting up manufacturing and manufacturing here on the ground?
We haven't seen any barriers yet, but we are in the process of setting up a development and manufacturing sites. What I will tell a little bit more about what Saab is doing in Sweden, and Saab as a company is investing roughly 23% of its turnover into innovation, research and development.
23%?
Yeah.
That's massive investment.
Yeah. And this is also something that we, of course, want to do in this country in the same way. We are working very hard and in depth with Swedish universities to be on the forefront when it comes to digitalization of the production and development. And this is also one of the reasons why Saab today develop the new generations of the Gripen fighter or the airborne early warning system in a much faster and less costly way than we did before. The previous generations were more expensive. So this is how we have adopted the fourth generation and are adopting the fourth generation of development and production.
Thank you.
From our side, I think getting into the new industries and new technologies, the biggest challenge is awareness and education. You suddenly, and the speed of innovation has just been phenomenal over the last couple of years. I don't think there's been a big barrier in the UAE other than educating the private sector. The government has done a fantastic job in setting up different innovation centers, different incubators, awareness, whether it's blockchain summits, additive manufacturing. It's sort of bridging that awareness from a government, younger population into the private sector. Until the private sector adopts it, it takes some time, and it's just, I think, a gradual progression. Otherwise, I see we're on the right track. You look regionally, probably this is the only place where you talk about blockchain, additive manufacturing, and people actually know what you're talking about. You fly out a couple of hours from here, and most people have no idea what you're talking about. So I think in that sense, we are on the right track. It just takes patience till it progresses.
Helmut, we heard about Swedish universities in that example. I know that you're working very closely with Emirati students and young people within your organization for science, technology, engineering, math that hopefully get us those emerging technologies. Can you share some of the success stories coming out of that?
Yeah, we are working closely with Khalifa University from day one. We had so far 30 students in Germany for internship programs. In the beginning, it was just a program because we were asked to do this from the government side. But later on, I find out in 2014, there's more behind because we need the young people, the young engineers to participate in our local production. And for this, you need the right people. And this is number one. How to get the right people is we have an assessment program. It means before we send the students in their third year of study to Germany, to our Germany technology companies in aviation, in defense, in metering, in metal, we need to find out if we have the right ones. if somebody doesn't like production and has no clue, maybe it's not a good idea. We do interviews. Out of 20 people, we choose 4. Like this year, they're going actually in 10 days. And then we see them in Germany, in Ramadan, in walking to the company, no limousine, no red carpet, no reduced working times. That means very stress for the young boys and girls. But we will find out in the assessment program who is capable to cope with all these challenges. And coming back, the right ones, we are doing mentoring programs and connect them with the local industry or incorporate them in our projects. And this is also one of the challenges. The challenges in these emerging technologies is the speed of change. We have to work in our life, in our working life, with the change management. Because human being is cozy when he always doing the same, if he's comfortable. He doesn't want to change. Why? Yeah. But if you see the life cycle products today, they are much, much, much shorter. iPhone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5X. Cars, every year you have a new car, yeah? Before, we had a Volkswagen for 10 years. Not a lot of changes, except the color. That means this is the change management. Is that what we have to learn? It's more the soft skills, to work with ourselves. And you can do it in all these sessions where we are doing awareness and then doing programs. And this is how future companies will survive. Even what was mentioned today, Toys R Us, it's dying. Why? Because change management. You have to censor from young to medium to old ages all the information. The youngest are much more faster than the oldest.
Well, it's
but
interesting.
Sustainability, yes.
Because you're addressing a question from another panel. Will artificial intelligence, will blockchain, will that create or destroy jobs, or is there a third option? And what you're talking about is actually something that maybe can be encapsulated by using the data storage, by the data analytics, and that is, how do you take the other generation's lessons learned and pass them on to the next generation maybe more quickly?
Yeah.
I have 3 young adults at home. I think I want to send them to your facility
this is
to
exactly
get that work
what we're
ethic.
doing with the emerging technologies. This is our daily life because we are growing with these things, and this is how we incorporate, how we integrate the young people from Khalifa University to give them lessons learned and also to learn from them. This is a permanent changing process, and we are happy, and we are happy to continue.
It's a great example. Simon, when you've seen I think the role of government here, and because you are deeply involved with the change management of Ministry of Defense, His Excellency Al-Bawadi gave a very good discussion about this last week at the Global Aerospace Summit, and about how the future is moving very quickly, and that maybe the speech that His Excellency gave 2 years ago has completely changed now in 2018. With your insight and in what you can discuss, maybe share some of those challenges that the UAE has had to overcome and how they did it, and how they're going to do it in the future.
Yeah, I think it comes back to the original point about requirements and how government takes their place in that, and then links on to how you react. The governments normally have sort of 2 types of requirements. One where they say, I want a newer version of what I've got at the moment, which can probably be furnished by going to someone who manufactures something and taking their next product off the shelf. That's usually fairly short-sighted. The issue, and Tim has a decent point where he says that technology is actually driving a lot of this. The issue is that those who set requirements or who identify what the requirements are need to work with the fact that technologies are going to move a lot faster than they are. And the trick here is to be able to look 30 years out and see what the various possibilities are, work out the environment in which you're going to be working, and see how that might stimulate you to do something differently, and therefore generate a new set of requirements which allow you to meet the challenges of that new environment. Now, the government isn't there to say, well, I'm looking 30 years out, I want that one, I want that one, I want that one. There is too much uncertainty at that sort of range. And so the way that certainly the UAE government is beginning to work is to have a process which allows them to look out to judge not only what they think they might want in terms of policy and in terms of the capabilities they might want, but to work with industry and with research and development to judge what the art of the possible is, and then to try and reduce the uncertainty by working out what might work and what might not work. And industry has a big part to play in shaping this, and R&D has a big part to play, because something might be a great idea, but if it's unfeasible, then it needs to be discarded. And then bringing that forward to a point that industry and government is involved in the dialogue, so that industry is capable of making sensible investment decisions, not immediately to produce a new version of the product they've got on the shelves at the moment, but to look further forward than that and to start to look at where they might want to be in 10, 15 years' time. I think that the second point allied to that is that we as a company work with the World Economic Forum, looking at a report which talks about the readiness and future of production. And the UAE is judged by that report to be a country of high potential, which means that it has probably a more limited industrial base at the moment, but it has all the enablers in place in order to make a huge jump in due course. And that is human capital, it's technology and innovation. It's all the things that we've talked about today. The big challenge for government is to make sure that all those elements which we know that the UAE has, we've talked about incubation, we've talked about funds for innovation, we've talked about startups. Now we know all those things exist because you can point to them. The big challenge is making sure they're all going in the right direction with the same focus, because the individual bits being greater than the sum of the parts is important. The coordinated response, which only government really can bring together to give you a situation and an environment in which all these things work in a to greater effect, is the important bit. That is what will deliver you the advantage in due course.
Well, and you helped me very nice in what is the last question. Then I do want to open it up to the audience for a couple questions before we wrap it up with a final word from our panelists. But you talked about, Simon, that you have to look 30 years out. So these emerging technologies for the future of manufacturing, looking decades out to work that timeline backwards. A structure to do a new set of requirements. What does that structure look like 30 years from now? It's the art of the possible. So with that in mind, and we have a number of entrepreneurs and we have inventors and we also have employers and investors, Ministry of Economy, Department of Economic Development, who have brought us all together. Let's dive down a little bit and talk about what do the future jobs look like with emerging technologies. So if you can maybe quickly, I'll start with FAHMI. FAHMI, if we can just go quickly around the panel, talk about, you have future technologies right now sitting in your manufacturing centers. What do those jobs look like today, and what will they look like in the future for manufacturing?
I think there's a big systematic shift happening, and I always make a joke saying anyone over 30 today is going to struggle in manufacturing. The whole landscape's changing. We're going from, and I see artificial intelligence, additive manufacturing, a lot of the challenge is going to come in white-collar professional jobs, not on the lower level. It's very hard to have to create a robot that does plumbing, and that's always going to be a challenge. So plumbers in the future probably will be a higher value. However, when you look at economies such as the UAE, this is a huge opportunity. We're not massive population industrialized nations. We don't need to employ 50 million people in manufacturing. So when you come to additive manufacturing, this is a fantastic niche. We see a lot of young people getting into engineering, getting into design, which is where I think a lot of the job opportunities are going to come. People who can embrace change, people who actually are on a higher, I want to say more on the, not the soft skills, but technical skills. And we're seeing it. You go to universities today in the UAE, you see the number of graduates, the number of people graduating and getting into industry. I mean, the number of people going into innovation centers, being incubated, I think as a per capita, it's probably one of the highest now. And that's a massive opportunity. That's a massive opportunity where we don't have to struggle with the re-employment and re-education of existing workforce.
Thank you. Jerry?
I had a quite recent experience of visiting one of the most modern factories in the world, fully digitalized. And I thought I was going into a production site with no people. That was totally wrong. There were a couple of hundred people working still in manufacturing. So in my view, it will not take away workforce, the manufacturing people. There will be more supporting the machines. But the product itself is produced more automated and with less failure on.
It's my role to always throw the hand grenade, isn't it, on these occasions?
As long as you jump on top of it, yeah. General.
Let me just read a quote that I came across the other day by a very eminent technologist who said that governments should tax companies' use of robots as a way to at least temporarily slow the spread of automation and to fund other types of employment. Now, some of you might be surprised to know that I've just quoted Bill Gates to you, an eminent technologist and an absolute icon of certainly the third industrial revolution. I think I'm absolutely with Jerry on this. I don't see this as being the drama that it is. I think German manufacturing industry is a really classic case in point. So I don't see the spooks that some are out there. And I certainly know that the UAE is addressing this the right way. You know, back to your point, Jerry, about who's actually going to code these machines. Well, guess which country is actually making a absolutely hardcore effort to develop coders? The UAE. So I think you're going about it the right way, and I don't see there's going to be a big drama. I think what is going to change is the nature of work. We won't be putting in all those hours that the Germans do. But what we might have is, we're going to see different types of workplace. We're going to see different ways of working. But the net effect for manufacturing is going to be onwards and upwards.
To be fair to HELMUT, since you're passing the hand grenade to him, I don't think they work longer. I think they work more efficiently. If you look at the numbers across Europe, but nonetheless, we won't argue. HELMUT, over to you.
Yeah. It's always difficult to look to the future, 30 years from now. I remember in the 80s when we introduced the computers, and we said paperless office. How many copies we draw today when the boss is coming and says, give me this report now. 200 pages, no problem, we copy it, yeah? Do we have less paper? Okay. We have a virtual world and we have a real world. In the virtual world, we discussed this. Of course, the work environment will change. Home office, shared working times. We have a global network. That means we are here today and tomorrow, but we can work from each place in the world. 3D printing. Do we need the spare parts on stock in this quantity when we can print it on a push of a button in Japan, for example? On the site where you need it, all these kind of things. I'm in the old generation, and I'm an optimist, but also a realist. And I have seen many outlooks in the future, in the past. In the real world, it's sometimes a little bit different. And this also has to be taught to the younger generation, because the real world is different.
Thank you.
I think there are a couple of points to make. I mean, thinking about the entrepreneurs who are sitting in the audience. I think the first one is that there has got to be a premium on dual use. If you look back into the 20th century, the two world wars were great efforts behind the necessity being the mother of invention. I think that technology and the generation of ideas and innovation is a greater force than that now. And we've heard a number of examples up in the panel in previous discussions today on technologies which could be of use in any particular environment, defense or otherwise. And I'm thinking particularly of the Emirates 3D, the training medium. I was thinking about the information management. There seems to me, bearing in mind the speed at which technology goes and the way people have to use it and react to it, a premium for those who can produce technology and innovative ideas and the industry which comes from them, which are genuinely dual or multi-use. Because I think that will produce a great dividend. I think the other thing is the impact of additive manufacture, 3D printing on logistics, because it will allow a greater dispersion. And if you think about particularly things like military operations, but anybody's remote operations, the ability not to have to shift huge amounts of stores forward, but to be able to manufacture in situ is going to make a great difference.
So the way I would speak to the youth today, and in some definitions I am one of the youth members, is basically two things that you would focus on, and certainly I focus on. The first element is to understand that I think the skill that you need, if I was going to identify two skills, the first skill would be the ability, the flexibility, the ability to adapt, the ability to learn, the ability to switch between different professions, to learn new skill sets is extremely important. Because if you're not able to keep pace with the rapid technological development that could go anywhere, right? Then you're really at a disadvantage and you might be left behind. So learning that skill of being adaptable, being able to learn, being able to work in different sectors and across different skill sets and pick up knowledge and skill sets along the way. The other thing is to move fast. Again, you know, if you're an entrepreneur and technology is moving at such a fast pace, if you're just thinking about it in your room and you take 3 or 4 months to think about it a little more, the idea might have been invented, implemented, and commercialized by the time you've woken up, right? And so it is extremely important to move fast. Obviously, you take calculated risk, but you move fast, you get things done as soon as possible and try to tackle that market opportunity whenever it arises.
That's really to the point of TIP today when they said invention, proof of concept, patent, quickly.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, before we turn over to the audience for a couple quick questions, I'm going to give the panel something to think about. We're going to come back for literally 1 second each, and I'm going to ask you what is the technology in 30 years that is going to be most important to manufacturing? Just one word about the technology in 30 years that's going to be important to manufacturing. So, can I turn it over to the audience and ask, we have a few minutes left for questions. Just a show of hands. Yes, gentleman here on the left. Microphone, please. So we can invest in microphones in the future. This is emerging technology.
Thank you very much for the panelists. We have enjoyed your discussion. My name is Mofid Batarse. I'm from Abu Dhabi Polytechnic. Actually, my question is for my colleagues from Germany. I do believe also in real world and in realistic. A virtual world is good. So my question is regarding the training programs that you are running now with different institutions here in United Arab Emirates. So the goal of this training is to gain and build educational, vocational skills for the technical force here and build up their future. So is there opportunity to develop these people and have their future in the market in international level, not only between Germany and United Arab Emirates? And how do you see the collaboration would go in the coming years?
Helmut, maybe that question is for you.
For me, it's training and education is essential, and especially to learn from each other. And why is German industry so successful? One thing is, and I believe in this, and I did a dual education system when I was after high school. When you know exactly what you do, you are good and you are identified. And we have in our companies long stay employees. They're not jumping around. It is important that the government in the UAE takes action to build platforms for this type of exchanges. I see in the Khalifa University, and I was one of the first, and I can tell you, I know what I'm talking about. I was always motivating other companies, and other companies said, okay, Helmut, it's nice to do something, but what is our benefit? because for me, and for our company, it's a strategic approach. But we don't get any money for this. Yeah? And there can be programs like offset or offset similar related programs to fund this. So the motivation factor is not only we are going, and I'm not talking about only Germany. This can be done with other technology partners in all over the world. The management at home always asks, what are we doing, why we are doing this, and what is our benefit? Yeah? And if this is funded, it's a little bit easier to widen these type of programs. I believe in this. This is the future. What is needed here, seeing also the local industry with all the challenges, all the actual challenges.
Thank you. I saw another question here, right here in the middle, please. If we have a microphone for the gentleman.
Hello, Stefan Haller, Harvard & Partners. One aspect of Industry 4.0 is to focus also on basic technologies like identifiers, sensors, actuators. Do you think that UAE may play a role in those technologies in the future?
And anyone on the panel would like to address that? Yeah, FAHMI?
In terms of sensors and these technologies, these have become a bit commoditized, and you're looking at scale. The technology has evolved quite a bit, and we're at a point now where I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's literally mass-produced. There isn't a lot more you can do with technology. Today, the sensor on our phones and the scanners on our phones are equivalent to a machine that you bought for $20,000, $30,000 just 4 or 5 years ago. For the UAE, looking at the other technologies where they're still at the beginning of the tip, where they fit the ecosystem and the kind of population and adaptability and so on, I think probably is more strategic.
That's all the time we have for questions. I'm already 2 minutes over my allotted time period, but what I would offer is to please see our panelists after this panel is finished, meet them directly, get their business cards. As we do every month, we encourage that direct participation. Before we close, I'd like to go quickly around the panel and what technology, emerging technology, that in 30 years will be essential to manufacturing.
Machine learning and material science.
That's 2.
Probably going to answer this a little bit different. I think if we would have known that today, it would have already been implemented.
Somebody that's going to invent it and not tell us.
Yes.
No. Thank you, Jared. Tim.
I'd go with blockchain.
Blockchain. Helmut?
In the manufacturing, I think 3D has a very good chance in the future to produce a lot of complicated things and make production much more easier.
Simon?
It's probably those technologies surrounding information management, because there's so much of it out there. Someone's going to have to learn to marshal it.
Mohammed?
Blockchain for me.
Blockchain. And I am going to vote for robotics. So, would like to thank our panel, FAHMI, Jerry, Tim, Helmut, Simon, Mohammed, Shukran. Thank you very much. Thank you to our hosts. Thank you to Ministry of Economy. Thank you to Department of Economic Development. Thank you to everyone that supported TIP today. And we very much are privileged to be here and sharing with you. And we look forward to meeting more of you at the break. Thank you very much. And a round of applause for the panel.